Hello, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on CFL Talk, joining me is David Morassutti. David, well, we're 1 week away, well, a week and a day from the Grey Cup, right?
Yeah.
And a lot has happened in that week and one day. Just to name a few, I think the important stuff to mention is we expect new management, we expect new players, we expect signings, we expect free agents. But the one thing I didn't expect, and I don't think it came this early last year, and that's the schedule.
Yeah, that seemed to be, there was so much going on, but I think the schedule was one that
Off
I
guard.
didn't expect the schedule to come out this early because some leagues technically try to get their schedule out near the end so then people can start thinking about the next season. But I thought this was quite early considering what's the rush, right? You know, I know in the past we've had to deal with dealing with a revised schedule and that schedule gets revised and then so many revisions. But
Will it happen? Will the season happen?
yeah,
Will it not happen?
now we're talking about a full 18 game season. And then again, people are looking at the
And
schedule.
preseason. Sorry to have interrupted you, but preseason too, right?
Yeah. And the funny thing is some people was like, was this schedule released by mistake? Like, was it like one of those where it was incomplete and they accidentally hit publish and they're just like, oh, I guess it's out now.
It sure feels that way.
Yeah. Do you want to unpack the schedule? Do you want to go over that
Yeah,
first?
I very for me, I got to be. I'm going to be honest here. For me, the schedule, I'm not that. I'm not that flummoxed by it. Um, I guess for me, it's X amount of games, have time, get to the games, do all that stuff. I'm more of a sheep in that regard. Um, Maybe I shouldn't be because you raised some interesting points off the air, and I want to hear them. This is one of those times I listen to people because for me, this is something that I have very few complaints about. I don't know why. I just do. It's just schedule sometimes. I'm just grateful. I guess maybe it's because I'm grateful that it's actually they're talking about having the season and having a regular 18 game season. The next best thing would be to say there's a 10th team, and then I'd be in heaven.
Yeah, I mean that's always been the biggest issue with the scheduling, and I think people don't realize that when you have an odd number of teams, it creates such an imbalance in the schedule and having to figure things out. This is why everyone wants that 10th T, especially on the East.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, we do.
Right? Because the Argos start the season on a bye, which I mean it's they're not the only team that's they've done it before. Many teams have had to start the season on bye, but eventually you want to have every single team start the season at the same time, and everyone finishes the season at the same time because you know with the way that the schedule went this past season, the Argos had like 20 days off between the end of their season and their first
I'm
playoff.
not sure that helped him in the playoff game. To be honest with you, it 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 it, it doesn't make sense to rest rust. I know.
Look, I get it for a player's perspective to get the time to rest any ailments, but you know, there is something in my opinion of too much time off, and that you got to ramp it up. Like my whole conversation when I asked the players about that was, we got a lot of veteran guys who have no problem ramping up when it's needed. I'm like, well, it's kind of unfortunate that you have to kind of then ramp it up when it's needed, and that you're not just already there at that point, right? And they got off to a great start, but then things fell off the rails like in that game. But Yeah, I just am not a fan of, a team having to wait to play because there's no one for them to play.
And then we have those crazy weeks where there's 5 games in 1 week, where you have a team playing at the front and the back of the week.
Yeah, I mean, with the
They
way
could
the
start the season like that, no? I mean,
yeah,
it would make you happier, wouldn't it? That's what I'm hearing.
well, I don't know if Canada Day lands on what day Canada Day lands on. Let
Well,
me take
July 1st,
I can
June.
take
I'm looking.
July 1st is
Okay, July
Friday.
1st is a Friday.
So, like I was saying, like let's say July 1st was a Monday
Okay.
or something. You start that Monday, almost like Labor Day, and then you can play a game on the following Saturday. Like you can give the team, you can make it work. I see what you're saying in that regard. I think it would be nice if
I'm
all the
just mentioning it because from what you're the closest, because I was really trying to help you out with getting that everybody plays the first week. That's all. I was just trying to help you in that regard because you were wanting that, and that's the only way you'll solve it is if you have a team play, twice in 1 week, so that everybody could play once. But that would just mean a team like, for example, let's say we throw out the schedule. We throw out the schedule. It's gone. See you later. Week 1 starts on June 9th and goes till June 11th. Instead of going to June 11th from Thursday till Sunday, and you have the team that plays one of the teams that plays on Thursday plays again on Sunday. Friday, Saturday, not very good, is it? So you would have to start the season on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday to do what we're talking about. And maybe they just don't want to start the season on a Tuesday.
you know what, and we talked about this on the podcast so many times. How the show started so many times. How many times we hate having those Tuesday games because I don't know about you. You know what? Right now for the NFL, it's working because there's nothing else going on right now. But when you have such a jam-packed sports schedule, you don't want to have a game on a Tuesday. I don't want to see a football game on a Tuesday.
It would either be the Tuesday before before the week starts or
Mhm.
at the end of the week. Maybe the
Exactly.
end of the week would be better. They
Like,
kind of
see,
hide it a little bit. Kind of
yeah,
a little, just hide it. So for example, you've got Montreal at Calgary, Ottawa, Winnipeg. Let me flesh it out. Thursday, you've got Montreal at Calgary,
mhm.
Ottawa and Winnipeg on Friday, Hamilton at Saskatchewan on Saturday, Edmonton at BC on Saturday at 10 o'clock. And then on Tuesday, you have the Argos play Montreal or Calgary. And then you have all 9 teams playing.
Yeah, and right, and what's the biggest? I mean, the only thing that doesn't work for, let's say, in Montreal is that they're out west. They got to travel
Right.
back
They're at
east,
Calgary.
the time change. But you could have I mean, it's not unthinkable to have a home team have two straight games. Like you could have
Yeah.
had the
Well,
Argos
the
start.
Argos did it.
The Argos could have started out west
Yeah,
to
they could start in Calgary. Montreal goes to Calgary, and then on Tuesday, Toronto plays Calgary. And
yeah,
Calgary's at home, so that doesn't hurt so much, the proximity of the games. It would be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because Thursday's the game. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. There you go. Tuesday, you'd have 5 days to get ready for the game.
and one thing the CFL was big about. I gotta find it in the. I have to find it in the release here. But they made it a big point in saying we have reduced the number of games. The games here. Actually, let me see if I can find it.
While you find that, I'll throw this little
Oh,
tidbit
here.
out there. Go
Okay,
ahead.
focus on player safety because this is the biggest part, right? The
Right.
22 campaign furthers CFL's commitment to player safety by continuing the league's trend of providing more recovery time before games. So in
Right.
2016, teams played with less than 7 days of rest on 55 occasions. This has now decreased in every season since. In 2022, we'll see that number reduced to 38.
And the
So
Argos only have one, if I remember correctly, when they were describing theirs, I think.
yeah. So that's the big thing is, yeah, the reason why injuries happen is rest is a big issue. And they got and teams also want to find a way to get enough practice time because we talked about how that at times is, hurt teams. I also think that look, the biggest thing here is also getting preseason back.
And 100%. Totally agree. The other thing that leads to injuries is a lack of focus. And nothing says lack of focus than COVID-19 in a season when protocols are being introduced. Players have never had to deal with things that way. Tell me they're not losing focus. Go ahead, try and tell me the poor players are not, those poor guys are the injuries are obvious because there's not the focus to their bodies and to their health. They have to, one side of them is trying to figure out, okay, am I doing this right? Oh, I can't go here, I can go there. How am I going to do this next meeting? How am I going to do my organize myself how I used to? Players would just go into the weight room. Well, this year they had to take turns going into the weight room. You had to organize when you could go in the weight room because only small groups of players could go in the weight room. So the other guys would have to wait for the weight room. So there was a lot of waiting and a lot of, as I say, a lack of concentration. I mean, we can run the gauntlet of the difficulties that the players had. Good news this year, thank goodness. Like you said, they've got the exhibition games. They've got the rest days. Fantastic. The one thing that they added too, for the benefit of the Western teams and for the host team being Saskatchewan, is the game is happening at least a week before it normally does. The Grey Cup game I'm referring to.
Yeah, I think this is the earliest the Grey Cup will
Yeah,
ever be played on.
the 20th. It's the earliest it's ever been. And
And
this is something the West has begged for because of the cold climate that they are.
I was just about to say, November 20th in Saskatchewan is still going to be cold.
Well, yeah, it ain't Hamilton or Toronto or Ottawa.
Exactly, right? And so, and at the same time, we look at the sports calendar and holiday time. It's too much going on, right? At least November, you're just after the MLB playoffs because they'll be done by then. The NHL season is still,
It's just underway.
it's
It's
just
just started.
underway.
Yeah.
NFL season isn't like right now. The NFL, if you're that the biggest competition as well is the NFL, right? Because the playoffs are a big thing in December. This is when you really figure out where teams are. Like you have to think about where other sports leagues are at, and there's
Yeah.
a reason why this.
Back a few years ago, David, the the Super Bowl was played January the first 2 days in January, January 2nd, the first Sunday in January.
Yeah, so leagues always have to find ways to make adjustments, and earning it earlier, especially because of the way that the climate's like in those places out west, is so much easier to know that okay, the latest a team will play is the third, the four teams is like the 13th. I'm still not a fan of having the East and West final I mean, all the playoff games on a Sunday. Grey Cup, yes. The other ones,
You a Saturday guy?
I'm a Saturday person, really. Because
College
look,
football,
college football, but
Hockey Night in Canada.
you're finishing before Hockey Night in Canada.
I
Or
get you. I hear you. I hear you. I'm just throwing them out there, just little
yeah,
landmines, little grenades. You could dodge them. They're tiny.
but like Sunday, like the Sunday games, you're going right up against the NFL.
Yeah,
So,
I'm not sure. I can disagree with you, so I'll just agree with you. Let's okay. The schedule's out there. It starts just to review for the folks that just joined us. David Morassutti, Candid, Frank Stanisci. The schedule has come out. More rest for the players. It has exhibition games in it. It finishes a week early. Um, a lot. I'll give you a chance for what because we covered the Argos. The one thing that you said off the air before you talked about the Hamilton thing. Just so we move on to other things, but that's another pet peeve of yours. I think that was pretty hot item for you.
yeah, no, it's a big issue because the thing about a schedule is it's good when you have the back sometimes with the home and home series. You have Toronto going up against Hamilton, and then they got them the next week. The rivalry's still fresh. Fans are still going at it. So it's nice to have that. But to have it 4 out of 5 weeks, to have Hamilton and Toronto play the same, what that really shows, in my opinion, lack of creativity and just laziness on
I
the
don't know.
CFL.
I don't have an explanation for it. It seems kind of
It's
awkward.
I've never in my years. Look, if you want to talk about
That means they play every game that they play next year in that window.
exactly
That's
when
tighter than a Russ Jackson throw to a receiver between 3 defenders.
if you want to get fans excited about the stretch run of the season, the stretch run is the end. Take two of those games and put them at the end and spread them out because really you're taking away these head-to-head matchups mean so much to the schedule. And if anything from and I'm going to bring the NHL into this because when they did the Canadian division, there were times where teams were playing each other 3 games in a row, and you got sick of seeing the same thing over and over and over again. Like you're not going to see anything different in 4 out of those 5 games. I think I think that it's a bad move from the CFL to do something like that because you want it to be organic. You don't want it to be forced. We already know this rivalry is big, but
I
it's
don't understand, David. What I don't understand is why there's an East-West game at the end of the season. I know you can't help it. There's 9 teams. I get that, but I really think that the league's missing out on something that they should be doing. And I understand Toronto and Edmonton playing in Week 19. I get that. Hamilton and Calgary. Instead, that's where a Toronto Hamilton can go. And why can't an Elks and Calgary game go in there towards the end of the year, where the playoffs? That's the playoff race, right? I mean, that's an opportunity to make games matter, instead of make games matter on how the other team does against another team. This is where Hamilton and Toronto, no matter what, in a 4-team division, the odds are pretty good they're going to be fighting for a position, right? And why not play against each other at that point in the season? But I guess what they're saying is, I don't know, maybe it's easier to sell these other tickets at the end of the season because it's more relevant, and the ones that sell well, Hamilton, get them out of the way in the boring time of the season. Is it the boring time? See, I shouldn't do that. I'm putting words in the CFL's mouth, but it just doesn't make sense. 4 or 5, you're right. That's crazy. A week early, I understand. The West has wanted that for ages, and every time the Grey Cup is there, they're going to ask for it. I know it now that they've done it once. It's going to always happen, and I can't blame them. I can't blame them if they want to go 2 weeks early. But when we're talking out West, what difference does a week make at the end of November is my question. I get it, you know, but here in Ontario, in Southern Ontario, we saw, if it wasn't for the fact that Hamilton was such a windy place, the game would have been perfect. I didn't like the wind. So can we change the topic and talk about the Grey Cup game? And that's the first thing I want to talk about. So good news, the schedule's here. You can buy tickets. You can give season tickets for Christmas. It's here in time. All that stuff. You got extra time to decide. Booking because everybody's got to schedule themselves too, right? You can't plan on things when there's a football game. So now it gets on the calendar first. You can work everything else in your life around it. Great, fantastic. Thank you, CFL, for doing this. I appreciate it. Now in Hamilton, the wind was we didn't talk about this too much, but this is important to me. I really didn't like the game because of the wind. To me, you can tell me all you want how much it's part of football and all that kind of stuff, David, but I did not like the wind. It became the team that wasn't on the field. Like we weren't talking about, oh boy, what's Hamilton going to do in the third quarter? They've got the win now. What are they going to do? Or you know what I mean? And we were talking about who had wind, and it was like suggesting that
yeah,
was the better team.
it was dominating. Yeah, it dominated the conversation a bit too much. Um, yeah, you don't want weather is the thing about the Grey Cup. How many Grey Cups have we talked about where weather was a factor? We've talked. It's been part
Many,
of the
many
allure,
times.
right? But
Many,
you
many.
don't want it. You don't like players talked about this. Like this was like a big part of the team's game plan. And I felt like early on, teams were just trying to play to the advantage of the wind
Right. That's the point. Like,
Yeah.
if it's going to snow, it's not as predictable, and or it affects both teams at the same time in almost the same way. I understand if there's winds and snow, I get that. But what I'm talking about is whether it's raining, it's snowing, it's sleeting, if it's coming down pretty much in an unpredictable direction, then it doesn't affect the game, in my opinion. But when you know the advantage and the direction it's going and it stays in that direction, it's monotonous. And it really, to me, it took away from the game. And I think those two teams deserve better. And that wasn't conducive to um, a good game if you weren't cheering for one side or the other. If you were just watching a football game, it wasn't good for that, because it doesn't matter which way the wind's blowing. If you're a Bomber fan and a Ticat fan, you don't care which way the wind's blowing. You want your team to win. I get that. I understand that.
Yeah, I know. What that's the part I didn't really like is that, you know, when the in football, it really takes away from teams wanting to throw the ball because you can't predict. It's harder to throw into the wind and all those things. So it takes away from the best part of the CFL, which is the passing game, being
And
able
the
to.
kicking game, because in the Canadian Football League, there's a lot of kicking, and kicking gives you field position.
How many punts looked
Oh,
absolutely
a
god awful?
9 yard punt, a 9 yard punt. Remember, 9 yard punt.
I saw
Hamilton
a
had a
punt
9
go
yard punt.
forward then backwards.
I've seen
That
one of those too. That was in Hamilton too. Not in the Grey Cup. It was a
but
playoff.
like, and I felt bad for the punters because yes, you know what? Punting in the CFL, there are not many great punters. But when the weather plays them, I mean, they had a chance really to, I think, to practice that the day before and try to get a grasp of it. But there's not much you can do when it's just that bad. Like I saw that punt that I said that went forward and backwards. Like I'm just like, what really is the kicker going to do? Like I don't think many kickers in other football leagues are going to be able to do much better than that in those conditions. And it takes away because the return game wasn't really as big of a factor because there wasn't much of a return at times, right? And
Yeah,
that
and the only reason I mentioned, I want to just slide this in, and then you can finish this topic. The only reason I mentioned is because it takes away from the game, and I think our Grey Cup game could have been better without the wind, and people who watch it uh, won't understand why the game was like that, because the game was not exciting to the extent where anything could happen at any time. You had to wait a quarter for something to happen for you, if it's what you wanted.
no, for sure. And like and how many players talk, I mean, we don't want the win to be the biggest story of the Grey Cup,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. When
That
it
finish
snows,
was,
both teams are throwing into the same crap.
yeah.
Both teams are running into the same crap. Both teams are defending in the same crap. It's literally a level playing field. But when it gets like this, anyway. All right. Another subject you wanted to talk about. You got a couple to pick from.
Do
Do
we
you want
go
to go
free
with the
agency?
GM? You want to go with the
No, let's
GM?
go with the GMs first because yeah,
Want to
let's
go
go
with
with
GM?
that first because I mean, the GM part then translates into the next section too. Yeah, so we have, I mean, we have two vacancies right now. Actually, technically three if you count Toronto, because technically
We don't know
uh,
what's happening there yet. There haven't
we
been
don't
any
know what's going on there yet. Yeah, so I mean, the Red Blacks had to wait until the Grey Cup was done before they can announce their move because
because
the
one of
person
the choices was
was working for the Hamilton Ticats, who was a little busy with something called the Grey Cup. Sean Burke, he's been with Hamilton for 15 years, so someone who's been a part of some very successful years in Hamilton. I think the Red Blacks did a great job of getting someone with. You want someone with experience in the CFL, but experience with something that has been long lasting, right? Part of something that's been a team that's had a really good run. I mean, really, Hamilton has been the most consistent team in the East for so long.
and you
That's
can add, David, I'm sorry for interrupting,
no, no.
then you can go on. Then you gotta take into account as well that when he started with the Ticats had not had good years. So this guy knows what it looks like when you have a team that's not good, and be a part of making it good, and what you said is perfect long term.
And I think if you're an Ottawa fan, the other thing that should make you, you know, somewhat feeling positive is that he sees Paul LaPolice as an asset because you get in a new GM and you're just like, is he gonna stick with what's already there? Because some, as we've known, a lot of GMs like to bring in their own guys.
I have it from good authority, David. This is not a stroke of genius. This is just what I know and what I heard and what somebody I can trust told me. They said nobody's going to be the GM that LaPolice doesn't want. It's going to be somebody that he can work with. So LaPolice had say in this GM. I
Okay.
promise you, I'm telling you the truth.
Well, and the other thing too is you don't want to have to. There are teams that don't want to go from scratch.
No, no, and in this case, it's like in every sport. You hire the GM after the coach. You got to hope that the coach gets along with the GM. We saw here in Toronto in hockey what happens when the GM doesn't hire the coach and the GM doesn't like the coach. You got to go through 3 years of you know of stuff that you don't need to go through, and Ottawa doesn't need to go through that. The good news is if you're Ottawa and if you're the GM of Ottawa, the good news is in LaPolice, the head coach, you've got a good fan base. You got some really good fans. You got some nice. I mean, they're the kind of fan base that they want here in Toronto. Hitting all those age groups, right? The ones that matter. 20 to 35. They have a lot of those. So they've got a good fan base, and I think they can reclaim them. They've had a little bit of trouble in recent years, but that can't be helped when the team literally was a doormat.
Well, the team didn't have a quarterback for how many, like the one they had how many different starting quarterbacks this year? Four, four or five. Like I'm
Well,
sorry,
they started with Arbuckle.
right?
They started with Arbuckle, and he went to. Then they did the trade for Nichols.
The switch for Nichols, and then Dominique Davis. Nichols gets hurt or shown that. I mean, at this point, I don't know how much
Gets hurt, still plays, does
Yeah,
not play well. People
Dominique
say, "Well,
Davis.
why is he playing if he's hurt? Put
Yeah,
somebody else in there."
Dominique Davis comes in, and then he gets hurt. I can't remember who was the backup to the backup in that game.
Oh,
It
oh
was
my
a
goodness.
receiver.
What's
Hart?
the name? No. Oh my goodness. Now I feel like. Um, yeah, well, carry on, and I'll see if I can.
No, there was So then they had to bring in a receiver to play quarterback. Caleb Evans then shows something, and then that went wayside, and then Duck Hodges finishes the season like that for sure alone. I mean I've seen NFL teams have similar issues, and not many fans can stick around for that. I don't blame Ottawa fans for not wanting to stick around for that. Um, and I think if you're Sean Burke, um, the first thing,
He's not here. The guy you're thinking of is not here, and damned if I can't remember his name now.
okay, I'll have to think about that. But if you're Sean Burke and you're Paul Appleese,
His name was a pun. His name was a pun. Remember, he had a name that. Anyway, go ahead.
but like if that's the number one position in the Nate Behar. Yeah, he on the 22nd he had to come in. Um, yeah, I found it right here. So
Good.
if you're Paul Appleese and you're Sean Burke, you are doing your best to solidify your quarterback position and your backup position. And at the same time, you are developing a third person.
And
It's
right away, this GM has brought somebody in of interest, the UFT receiver.
Yeah, I mean, first off, always will always be great to bring in a Canadian, someone local that can it's nice to give them the opportunities. Um, apparently a player who's also got some decent speed to him. And I think that's something in the CFL I don't think teams really do enough of is grab those speed guys, grab the explode. You think back to the players that have really made the CFL what it is: Chad Owens, Pinball, Brandon Banks in his prime, um, guys like that. That like even Lucky Whitehead this year, guys that just with speed can kill and create explosive plays and be bring the excitement to every game. So I think you're starting to see. I think more teams are starting to realize, you know what, maybe we need to address this going forward because I think it's an important thing that I think every CFL team needs to have.
Absolutely. So, new GM, a guy that knows how to build a team from scratch. And sometimes, an existing team can be tougher than an expansion team because you have to subtract and then add, or subtract and add at the same time. So it's going to be a tough road to hoe for this GM. And they're talking about the one thing I don't like is they're saying, well, this is going to be a 2-3 year build. Forget that. This is the Canadian Football League. You can turn things around in a year. You make the right moves, you spend the money the right way, and you have the good kind of coaching that you need, and you can do that. The difference between winning and losing in the CFL is marginal, in my opinion. So that I don't believe, but it's good for them to say that because they don't want to. I understand why they're saying it. They don't want to build up the hopes of the Ottawa fans. Any progress will be good progress for them. Any improvement will be good improvement because there's nowhere to go but up.
I think the last thing you want, I think the Argos are a good testament to the what you don't want to have happen. Go from being a terrible team to winning the Grey Cup to then going back to being a bad team,
Well,
right?
that's not something that keeps fan base interested. That's for sure.
No, and I think, and that was the that remains. I think when you look at now, look, not every team is going to be good. Teams are going to have good seasons. Teams are going to have bad seasons. But it's the ability to show, hey, we got something going here that you can be a part of. We might have not have done well this year, but next year we're gonna get back to this. We're gonna get back and we're gonna get better. So I think if Ottawa, that's what they need to sell right now. They don't need to sell that they're gonna win and be a Grey Cup contender, but we're basically the selling job should be don't expect us to be as bad as last year.
Competitive
Yeah,
football, that's all they gotta sell this year. If they give Ottawa fans are reasonable people. I mean, I don't think there's much more of uh, a nicer group of fans than Ottawa fans. They're really a good bunch of fans. They're young. They appreciate that they have the game of football. They know they were fortunate, early in the lifespan of the Ottawa Red Blacks, and they had so much success early. It was difficult for them to put the hate on the Ottawa Red Blacks when they hit down, got down on their luck. But now they've been down on their luck too long. So now they're expecting, and they have a right to expect, that this team, when they go to the game, they're going to be entertained. They're going to be able to support them. They're going to believe that when they go to the game, that the team can win. That's all the fans want. Actually, that's all any fan wants, right? They want to go to the game and they want to believe that their team can win when they go to the game. That's to me is the bar that that I think teams that are building, they need to achieve that. The extreme success like you're talking about with Toronto, and what Pinball Clemens said, what he's about, and he's about constantly being in the conversation for the Grey Cup. In other words, constantly in the conversation for winning the Eastern Division, whether they finish first or at least get to the final round of the East Division. They got to do that kind of stuff. So for Ottawa, it would be for me, I think the low bar would be them actually being in the playoff hunt, David, until the last few weeks of the season. That would make a happy, Red Black fan base. And with that kind of improvement, it wouldn't be pushing too hard to force the organization to make moves that hurt them in the long run. I think they can work with long-term goals under that specter, right? If they could do that, it'd be great.
no, for sure. Yeah, like the last thing you want is for your team to be, 0-6 or 0-7 to start the season and be like, well, okay, let's put these tickets up for sale and see if someone can grab more. All right.
I'm hoping they're competitive. There's nothing I like better than seeing a I love watching football games that you don't know who's gonna win, David. That's my favorite. That's my favorite. I love I should say that's true for every sport. I love watching a game where you don't know who's gonna win. You just don't know, and it's exciting.
No, I think that's the one thing that um this year showed us is that when teams are really bad, the product is just not like you don't want to see teams constantly getting blown out. And the problem with so many teams not being competent on offense in these low scoring games, yes, it can be fun when they're nail biting finishes, but it's nail biting finishes because neither team appears to want to even win the game either.
Well, we can complain about competitiveness and how and what it looks like. But I'd rather not because there's enough to complain about if you're a football fan. But I hear what you're saying. You want it to be good, you want it to be entertaining, and you want the fans and the game to be great. I get it. I can't argue with you, but sometimes we just got to hope that the game is, that they're playing the game, and it's something you want to watch, something that's got you on the edge of your seat, man. It's got to be like that. The Canadian Football League is a league and a game that can be conducive to that. You know, the pass game, which was missing this year, the offense, which was missing this year, it caused people to do what you're saying, which is they would slide back into their seat and get comfortable. That's not what you want when you're watching the Canadian Football League. You want people on the edge of their freaking seat. That's all BS. If in the Canadian Football League we're just watching a defensive team grind an offense into the ground, yeah, I get it. For the great experts in football, the people who understand all the X's and O's and they get the game and they know how important defense is, it's not entertaining to everybody, to the people you want to have in the stands. Unfortunately, the saying that offense sells tickets and defense wins championships, unfortunately, is true. It seems. I wish we could do something about that because I would like to see offenses win championships too, David. I'd like to see that too.
I have no problem watching a game that ends, like 37-31
Me
because
either.
because yes, you don't want to see teams that are just absolutely just there's just nothing there offensively. Sorry, defensively, like they're not competitive at all. But I also want to see teams show an ability to put points on the board, right? And not
Absolutely.
so there is a way there has to be a way to find compromise to get it going. And for Ottawa's sake, I think they're going in the right direction. They were the first to
Exactly.
do it. I think if you're the other thing about Ottawa is they made these changes early. They started the process early, and usually it benefits the teams that started early because they're not playing catch up.
And the question is, I guess uh, we know that the Argos don't, they need a GM. You mentioned that. We know that, you know, Edmonton needs a GM. We know that they brought in Wally Buono to be the guiding hand that puts together the management team there. Great person to do that. Very reputable, great name. Can probably get any phone number that organization wants to find somebody, a prospective employee, whether it be GM, coach, or everything. The name that comes up in that regard is always Chris Jones. He's a factor every way. In Edmonton, he's the guy that many people I'll call, let's say, I'll put a label on it and we can disagree about it. The experts say Chris Jones is perfect for that, but the heartfelt Edmonton Elks fans, see, I did it. The Edmonton Elks fans, they don't forget that what he did to them. So they've got a bit of an enigma going on, and an emotional battle, I guess, on whether a guy that brought them their last Grey Cup was welcome back. It's hard to believe, to say that let's not bring back the last guy to win us a Grey Cup. That sounds crazy to me. I don't know. Sounds crazy to me, but I can understand it. That's what I'm trying to say. Why I said what I said.
So yeah, you're looking at I think two vastly different candidates here. You're looking at a guy who, in past years, has wanted pretty much all the control, or just
Right.
wants to do everything. You got a guy who, frankly, will not want to do everything, right?
May not want to do anything. Remember, he retired.
So now here's the thing about Chris Jones that I think some people believe makes him a leading candidate. If he's willing to do everything, well, guess what? That saves you quite a bit of money.
And they need to save some money because they got a coach they're paying for the next couple of years.
Right? So that's a blessing, but it can also be a curse. Because can you trust Chris Jones to make all the right calls on the personnel side? Because look, the guy who used to work for him as a VP of personnel, I believe at the time, was John Murphy, who right now is not allowed to work in the CFL because he is suspended by the league.
Right. That was in Saskatchewan you're talking about. Murphy
Yeah,
was with
when they were in Saskatchewan together, they were working together. So Chris Jones, yes, he was making decisions, but there was somebody else pulling the strings and doing the work.
Isn't that funny? He rolled from that relationship to the one in Toronto, which was basically the same thing.
Yeah,
in GM and name only, and in not in name.
Sorry, in job
description only. In job description only.
Most people kind of talk about him as the GM. At least I did. I know a lot of other people.
I did too. We had conversations with him where we talked to him about players and player, acquisition and signings and stuff like that. He had all the answers that we wanted answered, that he would answer them. Pinball didn't do any of that. So yeah, so I get what you're saying, 100% in total agreement.
So
how can he find someone like that, Jones?
And that's the thing, right? He has to be able to trust. Now, there are options out there. There's a lot of guys that are probably gone for interviews that are being interviewed now or were interviewed in other places. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I think the reason why they'll go with Jones is because of that reason, is because he can play, he has multiple hats. He can wear multiple hats and do many things. But I also think you got to also look at, the track record of a guy who just helped Winnipeg go to 2 straight Grey Cups, win 2 straight Grey Cups, and establish a continuity that I think every team is striving for, and
should, as far as we're concerned, right?
And building a team that was not very good, right? We're talking about Ottawa. Edmonton's now in the same boat. A team that was not very good and now needs to get to that level. And it's not easy to get there. You need someone that knows how to do. It's one thing, as I said, it's one thing.
Similarities also extend, David, if I can interrupt you, the similarities also extend to the fact that both Ottawa and Edmonton won Grey Cups around the same time.
Exactly, right?
So they're on the same flight path.
And teams that have gone to the Grey Cup but then have failed to get there again and stay there, right?
Yep.
And so, yeah, so I think I think I'm not going to totally discount Chris Jones and what he's able to do, because
do you know the other irony? The other irony is, if you look at who the GM is in Ottawa and what you're talking about, he comes as a fresh face. He comes not as a GM, but as somebody who did a job like a GM. So, this is kind of neat in the Canadian Football League, and I think you can lay it at the foot of the cap, the management cap. They got to take on guys who haven't really done the job, do the job. This is the same thing that happened with the coach in Toronto, where inexperience means you pay them less, which means there's a better chance you fit under the cap. And that's what I think you're right. That's what you're suggesting with Edmonton, not because they shouldn't get Chris Jones, but because Chris Jones and a legitimate coach or GM, depending which position he takes, right, to get them both is going to be hard under the cap. That's going to be the difficulty.
And I also think maybe what Chris Jones has on top of that is, as you said, he's got to be able to recruit players. How many players would like to play for a Chris Jones defense? I think quite a few would.
Absolutely.
We saw what he did in Toronto. He came into a really tough situation in Toronto, and he turned that team into pretty good defense despite not being there in training camp, coming in almost halfway through the year. So I think if you're a defensive player and you're seeing the impact defenses are having, sure, I'll go play for Chris Jones, even for a year, maybe two. But I think Chris Jones has the reputation that I think a lot of CFL players who want to win, because if you're on a winning team, let's say you win this, go into a good team, a good situation, you can then potentially use that to anchor yourself into a better situation.
Even better, David, even better is the fact that Chris Jones came into what I think was a pretty good defense. I don't think it was a bad defense. I think it was a good defense. And he came in and worked with what they had, didn't tear it down to the floor. He worked with what he had and improved where he felt, it was almost seamless. The move from him coming in, you would expect a guy, an A personality like him, that there have been a lot of changes, but he worked with what he had. So to me, it tells me that he can cooperate with people, even in his love of defense and having control. So I think he can find somebody. I think you're 100% right. The question is, who is going to be that middle management? Who are going to make up that middle management of that? Because if you have him running down the line of the highlight jobs, right? If he becomes the head coach, defensive coordinator, and he hires a guy, he has to hire a guy, let's say, just spitballing here, he has to hire an offensive coordinator. I don't know. Is there a guy in Saskatchewan to be willing to come back to Edmonton?
That would, oh man,
Huh?
you just want to pull on all the heartstrings. But I also think, you know what? I think it's also time for the CFL to bring us some new ideas.
And they're doing it. They're doing it. Look, with the Argos, you and I are saying that the guy who's on the A list to replace Murphy, right, is another guy who works in the background.
Yeah. And
Magri's the guy. Magri could be the guy.
Yeah, I think it'd be the easy move for Toronto to do that. I think maybe Toronto can go with maybe
you think they can go with a higher profile guy,
higher profile, or even different, something different. Is there? Maybe this is a time where you develop. Maybe Vince gets promoted, and someone who takes Vince's job.
That's what I'm thinking, because Pinball's going to be the GM. I don't see the organization avoiding paying him under the management cap, right? He's part of the management cap. So again, back to that story, that we have. Good news is they're not paying a head coach next year that won't be coaching. Good news there. They might have a defensive coordinator coming back who is under not suspension. Well, yeah, I think it was. I think they worded it suspension, right?
No, they said it was a personal
leave. Yes, leave. You're right, 100% right. So if Jones goes, they're okay on defense. I don't think there was a big problem with their defense, at least by virtue of the players that that Jones kept. Obviously, he was happy with the roster. So it seems like they put together a good team. And the good news is, if they bring somebody in, it's got to be somebody that doesn't want to tear things down. And we stick to that agreement that we have, and we hope all CFL teams have learned that continuity is important. You need continuity. They can't start over. Even though it gets you to first place in the Eastern Division, it doesn't get you a championship. We know that, right? So they gotta have that familiarity, that continuity that Hamilton and Winnipeg had, and that's why they got there. In my opinion, that's the main reason they got there. The next team closest to of course Winnipeg was Saskatchewan, and they've had themselves a lot of continuity. And then there's Calgary, a lot of continuity. So these are the good teams that can ride real problem situations and ride them out well. Calgary proved it to us this was a team without a quarterback that was their highest paid player. And look what they did.
Yeah,
It came close.
this is true. No, and I think, yeah, I just think that, the CFL needs, there's a lot of things that the CFL needs to work on and look to build towards. And I think it's, I mean, we'll talk about it next with free agency, but I think that if you're a GM right now, if you're just a front office, you just want to find some way to keep things together. And but I also just think, you know what, they don't want to keep, you don't want to get stuck in the old ways, because team leagues reinvent themselves, because you need to attract the younger audience. What used to work in the CFL doesn't always work forever, because defenses get better. Defenses figure out ways to stop. Offenses need to find ways to turn things around. So hopefully that can change. And yeah, and I think it'll
Yeah,
be an
you're right.
interesting
Hopefully it
few
will
weeks.
change. So, free agency. We only got a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So we got to make it count. We got 4 minutes to define free agency. So we're not going to get to do that in 4 minutes. I think we can define it. But what we can do is set the table for future weeks. So
Yeah.
I'm going to say
We got
this.
lots of time to talk about free agents. For sure.
You joked and you said there's 1,000 free agents. Really, what's the point of talking about free agents? Let's just list the players that are staying on the team. I mean, you might as well go about it that way, because there's 5 guys that are staying on the team. Everybody else is in flux.
You know what? It's almost like, when you're talking about players right now, athletes that have COVID, it might be easier to name the athletes who don't have COVID than the ones who do have COVID right now,
it's
right?
starting to
But
feel that way.
I think, again, I understand the business model, but oh my goodness, Winnipeg's pretty much their entire roster needs to be signed. That is such a imagine the headache. Like, why do GMs want
Two
to put?
Grey Cups. Two Grey Cups. The guys that didn't take more money and they said, come on, let's keep it together for one more year. Okay, now we kept it together for one more year. Well,
If we do it
last
again,
year, last year I said, I'm okay with not taking a lot of money. I'll take a haircut, a little one, just so I can win again. But even winning gets old, I think. When it
look,
comes to supporting your family, I mean,
yeah,
supporting your family, winning championships.
some
Bit of both.
players made sacrifices because they had a year off. They
Yep.
made a lot of sacrifices. It gets to a point where, you know what, I kind of want to make, I think Don Jackson. Actually, maybe we'll end it on this. Don Jackson, when he saw that Trevor Harris, who got released by the way, was due to make $300,000 as a roster bonus, he said, "I don't think I'll ever see that in my CFL career." 300,000. This is his tweet. 300,000. You've got to be kidding me. I won't make that in my CFL career. Bonus? Lame, lame, lame.
Well, it's all about negotiation skills, right? And that's what free agency is all about.
And it's also just which positions do CFL teams value more than others. We know, really, I think there's only 3 running backs in the CFL that would be paid more, like a significant
It's
chunk.
a football thing, David. It's a football thing. In the NFL, where there used to be Franco Harris and Gale Sayers, and now it's like players times 3 as running backs for an organization. It's not, the star running back. I saw Chuba play a really good game the other day against the Bills. The one back, and the CFL is even, it's too bad, because there just isn't enough money to go around to really make players feel like stars. David, that's the thing. I think what Don Jackson is saying is that I'm not a star player. It doesn't matter if I play like a star. I'm not going to get paid like a star. And that's the sad part about the Canadian Football League, that all of us, our hearts go out to them, especially for those of us that I don't want to start crying or nothing. I mean, I'm not going to start doing a tag day for football players, but the fact is that when when a quarterback gets a $300,000 bonus, I don't begrudge him it. It's part of the negotiation. But in the grand scheme of things, $300,000 can go a long way towards a team.
It can, and we've seen teams spend almost close to 3 times that amount for a quarterback in total. And
And
so
and what do they get for it? You know, what we saw an example of how insignificant quarterbacks can be. The two best quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League over the past few years, right? Over say three. I'm gonna raise it to three. Three of the best quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League the last 5-6 years. Harris, not first. These are no order. Riley and Mitchell were not impactful this season. Three of them.
they didn't make the Grey Cup. This was not like 2018 where you had arguably the two best quarterbacks in the CFL in that Grey Cup.
Wonderful talents, great people, but ineffective on the field. Not blaming them, just making a point, you know. So there's more to football than the guy under center. But he's a very important player on a team. I don't doubt it for a second. But we saw teams this year not be rewarded for players who are expected to be justifying the pay that they make. We didn't see it happen this year. Three of the top quarterbacks over the past 6-7 years. Am I exaggerating, David? Help me. I don't know. I don't think I'm exaggerating.
I don't think so, and I think teams that find ways to have a more balanced attack, just like in other football leagues, have proven to be a lot more successful and not putting all the hopes into one player.
And look at the two Grey Cup combatants. Zach Collaros, you and I, we love him. Great quarterback. We think the world of him, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Zach Collaros that did not carry that team. By that, I mean, when we watched the game, he didn't carry that team. In the locker room, probably one of the greatest guys, great leader, all that stuff. I'm not taking that away from him, not discounting that. I'm just saying that Winnipeg is more than a quarterback. It's more than once they got a kicker that could kick 4 out of 4 field goals, they were the least productive kicking team in the CFL 3 quarters through the season. You know, they made a trade for Serge Castillo for a reason. And when you have that, and then you have defense, and then you have offense, and then you have a really good quarterback, but you got to pay all those guys, David. So we've gone full circle. Where are they going to get the money to pay all those guys?
Yeah. Well, that's something we'll have to talk about going forward because I don't know.
We're going backwards now, right? We're running out of time, folks. You know, the CFL is over and done for another year. It's gone a week. And already I can tell you, folks, the one thing I love about the CFL is it because there's only 9 teams? I don't know. But there's always something to talk about, the excitement about the Canadian Football League and what's going on. I'm always thrilled to talk about it, and it's always great to have you here, David. David Morassutti, thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
For David Morassutti, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk, airing live Mondays at 9 p.m. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching. I'm Candid Frank. He's David Morassutti. Eduardo Harari is working the control.